There are places in this world where the dead whisper louder than the living. What if I told you that a simple walk through a quiet Nebraska forest could steal your soul? What if a stone buried in the dirt, smooth and silent, could open a door to something ancient and hungry? This is what Rand remembers. This is how it all began. In a place the locals called the Black Hollow. They never warned us directly. Just avoided the name. Changed the subject. Lowered their voices when we walked by. But it was always there. The hollow behind the trees. A dip in the land where no birds sang, where the fog lingered even on dry days, and where the wind, when it came, never sounded quite like wind. They said it was bad soil. Some said it used to be an old burn pit. Others whispered about poisoned roots. But we all knew. Something was buried there. Something old. Something restless. Rand's family moved in thinking they'd bought paradise. Acres of land, silence for miles. But within weeks, the silence became a curse. The cows wouldn't approach the fence line near the woods. Lights flickered even with no storm. Doors closed on their own. There were nights when they'd all wake up to the sound of humming. Low, almost like a lullaby, but warped, twisted. Rand started keeping a journal. He wasn't sure why. Just felt compelled. The first pages were innocent, drawings of squirrels, trees, tracks in the mud. But by the third week, his sketches had changed. Symbols began to appear. Circles inside circles. Figures with hollow eyes. Trees growing from coffins. He didn't remember drawing most of it. One evening, he found claw marks on the outside wall of the barn. Parallel, deep, not made by any animal he knew. The next day, a deer carcass was found lying near the hollow, its limbs arranged in a spiral. No blood. No scent. Just wrong. That's when the nightmares started. In his dreams, Rand stood at the center of a ritual circle. 5 figures around him, robed, faces hidden. They whispered in a language he couldn't understand. At the center of the circle lay a stone, blacker than night, pulsing like it had a heartbeat. Behind the figures, something massive crawled through the trees, just out of view, watching him. He started waking up with dirt under his fingernails. Sometimes his feet were muddy, even though his bed was clean. His father thought he was sleepwalking. His mother said it was just stress. But Rand knew better. The old woman in town, Widow Kane, told him about the Black Hollow. How it was once the site of an execution, 5 women burned alive for witchcraft. But the town had gotten it wrong. They weren't witches. They were guardians, holding back something ancient beneath the soil. The fire had broken the seal. The curse had been buried, not destroyed. And now, it was waking up. Rand wanted to leave. Begged his parents. But they were invested. They laughed it off. Then a local boy vanished. No search party found him. Only a single item was recovered, his journal, soaked in creek water, the last page smeared with what looked like ash and blood. Scrawled across it were 3 words. It's not dead. The next day, Rand and his friends followed the stream behind the barn, chasing a dare. A challenge to spend the night near the hollow. They brought flashlights. Sleeping bags. Snacks. They found something else. A shack. Rotten, leaning to one side, almost swallowed by the earth. Inside, dustless furniture, burned symbols on the wood, and a Bible. Pristine. Unaged. Opened on the floor. Waiting. The shack looked as though it had clawed its way out of the earth itself. Half buried. Rotten walls leaned like they were surrendering. The roof sagged under the weight of time. But the air around it, still. Unnaturally still. No birds, no crickets. Only the hum. That low, warbling tone they had heard in their dreams. Rand stepped inside first. The floor creaked beneath his weight like it hadn't been touched in decades. Dust should have filled the air. But there was none. Not a single speck. The place was clean. OT tidy, no, it was broken, collapsed, dead. But untouched by time. A black iron stove sat in the corner, cold and sealed. An old mattress slumped in the shadows, chewed apart by something small and clawed. Torn clothing hung from rusty nails. Broken plates. A lantern with no fuel. And on the floor, beneath the lone beam of light filtering through the roof, lay a book. A Bible. Perfect. Unaged. Its pages glowed faintly, as if they remembered light even in shadow. No dust. No mold. No damage. Just words. Crisp, black print. One page, held wide open as if someone had set it down and stepped away only seconds ago. Rand froze. The others shuffled behind him, whispering, their breaths shallow. But he was drawn to it. Something about it, about the way it waited, called to a part of him he didn't know existed. He picked it up. The cover was warm. Not just warm, beating. As if something lived beneath the leather. Inside, the page displayed a passage from the Book of Revelation. A verse about the pit, the key, and the smoke that rose like a furnace. As his eyes moved across the words, a voice began to form in the back of his head. Not words. Just intent. Something was sealed. Something wanted out. Paul stepped beside him, reaching for a tattered coat hanging by the door. As he lifted it, a small notebook dropped from the pocket. Rand picked it up. A leather-bound journal, stained and cracked. Inside, sketches. Circles. Figures without faces. A spiral drawn over and over again. And one phrase, carved deep into the final page with something sharp. I am underneath. Then the air changed. Colder. Heavier. Shane turned toward the back of the shack. There's something behind that wall, he said. They found it behind a broken cabinet. A narrow hatch, sealed shut with nails long rusted. Someone, long ago, had tried to bury something beneath the floor. Not to protect it. To protect us. Rand hesitated. But something in him wanted to know. The others stepped back. He reached down and pried it open. The wood screamed. Beneath it, dirt. Oft, black, disturbed. Like something had crawled through it recently. At the center of that soil, resting like a heart, was a flat black stone. Polished. Impossibly smooth. They didn't touch it. Not yet. But in that moment, they all knew. It was watching. The soil around the stone pulsed. It didn't move. Not in the way eyes can see. But something shifted. Something deeper. Like the land itself was breathing, slow and strained. The black stone lay there, impossibly smooth, carved flat and perfect. No markings. No symbols. And yet, it radiated purpose. Hunger. Rand reached toward it first. His hand hovered inches above the surface, shaking. Not from fear. From something else. Like static. Like gravity. As if it wanted to pull him closer. The moment his fingers brushed the stone, the world dissolved. There was no light. No sound. Only the overwhelming sense of being beneath the earth, buried alive. His chest tightened. Breath lost meaning. And in the stillness, the voices came. They didn't speak in words. They seeped into him. Memories that weren't his. Screams that echoed from centuries past. Faces, burning, melting, vanishing, women in flames, holding hands as the fire swallowed them whole. Then silence. And when Rand opened his eyes, he was no longer standing. He was lying in a coffin. Wood against his back. Dirt above his face. But there was no body. He sat up. Panicked. Clawing at the darkness until two shapes appeared at the edge of the grave, Paul and Shane, just as dazed, their eyes wild and empty. They had all touched the stone. They had all been taken. The three of them staggered away from the hole, too stunned to speak. Only the wind spoke now, whispering through the trees in voices that sounded almost human. Back at home, the boys didn't talk about it. Not really. But something in them had changed. Rand saw it in their eyes, how they moved slower, blinked less, stared longer at nothing. Paul started drawing symbols again, pages and pages of spirals. Shane began sleepwalking, his fingernails packed with dirt each morning. And yet, they kept going back. Every day, pulled by an invisible leash. Each time, the connection with the stone grew stronger. Each time, the visions became clearer. They no longer saw coffins. They saw graves. Then skeletons. Then nothing at all, just shadow. And through it all, the euphoria grew. It was addictive. Like being submerged in something pure and dark and eternal. The kind of feeling that made the world outside seem pale. But with it came something else. Decay. Not physical, but spiritual. Their reflections grew dimmer. Mirrors fogged when they passed. Dogs barked as if they were strangers. And once, Rand found a page in his journal that he swore he hadn't written. It read, 3 went in. 2 remain. He didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But the stone did. And it was waiting. The whispers came at night. Soft at first. Like wind through dead grass. But they grew louder with every visit to the stone. More insistent. More familiar. Rand could almost make out words now. Sometimes his name. Sometimes Paul's. Sometimes names he didn't recognize, whispered in voices that sounded like they were being spoken through dirt. And always, they came from beneath the ground. He started hearing them outside the shack, then outside his window. One night, he awoke to find his closet door open, though he never left it that way. Footprints, muddy and small, led from the hallway into his room. They stopped beside his bed. When he followed them backward, they vanished at the threshold. No signs of entry. No forced door. Just the chill, and the smell, of rot, of old wet soil. Paul grew more distant. He no longer joked. He didn't laugh. He spoke in clipped phrases, like each word took effort. His drawings turned violent, bodies wrapped in barbed wire, mouths sewn shut, eyes gouged out. When Rand asked him about it, Paul simply said, "They're showing me." Shane had started writing, too. Not words. Just numbers. Pages and pages of them. Repeated combinations. 13, 7. 5, over and over again. Rand eventually realized they matched headstone numbers from the local cemetery. But those graves were empty. No one remembered who had been buried there. The deeper they went, the worse the dreams became. Rand dreamed of being pulled underground, his fingers clawing at stone and roots, mouths whispering against his skin, telling him to let go. One night, he dreamed he was being buried alive by people wearing masks made of animal skulls. Their hands were made of bone. Their prayers were backwards. And every time he woke up, something followed him back. The voices started during the day. Faint at first, then louder, even when no one else heard them. The shadows in his room moved when nothing else did. Lights flickered, then stayed off. His reflection in the mirror smiled, even when he didn't. One evening, he found his journal wide open. The ink was still wet. He hadn't written anything. But there was a new entry. One sentence. The dead remember who walks on their backs. That night, he heard the sound of digging. Not outside. From under his floor. The next day, Shane told him something was wrong. He said he woke up standing in the cemetery, hands covered in blood, his shirt torn. He didn't remember how he got there. But he remembered the smell. He remembered hearing a voice that sounded like Rand's. It wasn't Rand. It never was. And yet, something wearing his voice had spoken. Whatever lived beneath the soil had found a way to climb higher. They could feel it in their bones. And soon, it would need more than whispers. They kept going back. Even after the voices. Even after the blood. Even after Shane woke up with dirt in his mouth and Paul started speaking to someone who wasn't there. They went back. Not because they wanted to. But because they needed to. The Raven Stone had become a tether, binding them tighter with each visit. The moment they touched it, everything else faded, the fear, the guilt, the confusion. In its place came warmth, darkness, weightlessness. A false peace. A bliss so deep it hollowed out what made them human. Rand tried to resist. For days he stayed away, locking himself in his room, ignoring the whispers. But it called louder. It promised silence. And when he returned, the stone welcomed him like an old friend, waiting, pulsing, alive. That day, they didn't just touch it. They lay down beside it. And when they woke again, something was gone. They no longer dreamed in color. They didn't feel hungry. Pain dulled. Time blurred. Emotions began to unravel, until joy, sorrow, fear, and rage all blended into a single numb silence. Shane no longer recognized his own handwriting. Paul stopped blinking. Rand's reflection didn't always match his movements. The stone wasn't just taking their thoughts. It was feeding on something deeper. One night, Rand heard someone whisper from the edge of the woods. Not from beneath. From above. From the trees. A shape stood there, tall, robed, its face hidden in shadow. It did not move. It did not breathe. But Rand felt it smile. Later, he found a page in the journal. The handwriting wasn't his. But the words were burned into the page, as if written with heat. The pit does not gift. It trades. You've taken. Now it wants more. And more it did. Rand's mother stopped remembering his name. Paul's dog refused to enter the house. Shane's little sister began screaming whenever he entered the room. Then came the first missing child. A girl from the neighborhood. Last seen riding her bike past the cemetery. Her shoes were found outside the shack. No footprints. No drag marks. Just absence. The town began to whisper too. Old fears resurfaced. The hollow was cursed. The woods were waking. Something was watching. But Rand and the others couldn't stop. They needed the stone now. Needed the feeling. The silence. The escape. They were addicted to the abyss. And the abyss was no longer satisfied with silence. It wanted voices. It wanted lives. The signs were always there. They had just stopped noticing them. The shadows no longer waited for night. Reflections twitched when the boys were still. The wind spoke in sentences. The voices beneath the floor now whispered from behind the walls. Closer. Bolder. And Paul had changed. He no longer responded to his name the first time. He stared at people without blinking. Sometimes, when he spoke, it wasn't his voice. Too low. Too old. The others felt it but said nothing. Fear, perhaps, or denial. But the truth was waiting in plain sight. In his drawings. They had grown stranger. Symbols layered over diagrams. Ancient alphabets intertwined with spirals and limbs. One page showed a human body, split open, hollow inside, with a black stone pulsing at its core. Above it, a single phrase written in looping, alien script. The vessel must bleed. Rand found the old church records hidden beneath the shack's floorboards. Pages crumbling, bound in thread, ink long faded. But one entry remained clear, an excommunication from 1712. A man named Elias Crow, accused of necromantic rites, bone magic, and possession attempts. Buried not in the churchyard, but deep beneath the hollow. Paul had written that name in his sleep. Scratched into the wall. Into the skin of his arm. Shane began waking up in different clothes. Once in a jacket that wasn't his. Once barefoot, standing in the backyard with no memory. And once, wrapped in a burial shroud. Rand watched them from across the room and wondered, which part of them had already left. Because something else had entered. The ritual had begun. The Raven Stone wasn't just an object. It was a key. A beacon. A blood-soaked altar. And the three of them had become the steps of an ancient rite, one that required loss, silence, sacrifice, and eventually, a body. The possession wasn't dramatic. No levitation. No screaming. Just slow replacement. A fading of identity. One thought lost here. One memory misplaced there. Until the person still looked the same. But something else lived behind the eyes. Rand caught Paul speaking backwards into a broken mirror. He saw Shane leave notes in a language no one taught them. He found his own journal filled with confessions he didn't write, rituals, invocations, names of the dead. The door had been opened. The blood was only the beginning. The night began in silence. No wind. No insects. No moon. Just the smell, damp metal, like rusted chains, and something older. Like old blood dried into stone. Rand awoke not in his bed, but on the floor, fully clothed, mud on his hands, blood beneath his nails. His journal lay open beside him, a single phrase scrawled in frantic strokes. One must fall so one may rise. The air outside was thicker than smoke. Shadows dripped from the trees like oil. And above the hollow, the stars had vanished. He followed the trail, dirt disturbed, broken twigs, footprints too deep for any normal footfall. They led to the shack. Its door already open. Light flickered inside, though no candles burned. Inside, Shane stood motionless, face blank, hands stained crimson. His shirt torn, eyes wide, as if holding back something. Or someone. Paul knelt in the center, muttering. His voice layered. It spoke in two tones, his, and another, deeper, hollow, ancient. He carved symbols into the wooden floor with a bone shard. Symbols Rand had seen before. On tombs. In dreams. Under his skin. The ritual was ending. The vessel was nearly full. Rand called out, but his voice came out dry. Distant. Shane turned, slowly, painfully. A tear rolled down his cheek, mixing with blood. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Then he lunged. They fought like brothers torn by something neither could explain. Fists. Scratches. Desperation. In Shane's eyes, Rand saw him begging to be stopped. Begging not to finish what had already begun. Rand reached for the fireplace poker. Swung. When it was over, Shane lay still. The symbols burned brighter. Paul screamed, not in pain, but triumph. And something opened. Not a door. Not a window. A rip. In the air. Black and endless. A clawed hand emerged first, long, thin, bone-white. Then a face, not human. Hollow sockets where eyes should be. And a mouth that didn't move but whispered nonetheless. Rand stared, frozen, until he heard Shane's voice behind him. Not from the body. From the dark. I didn't want this. Rand turned too late. Paul's body collapsed. And the thing stepped through. Rand didn't remember running. He only remembered the sky, red, cracked like bleeding glass. The trees bending backwards. The sound of something ancient breathing through the soil. His legs moved without thought. His lungs burned. But the thing had stepped through. It hadn't spoken. It didn't need to. Its presence was a voice in every shadow, a pressure behind every eye, a cold claw wrapped around the soul. Wherever it walked, the air warped, light bent, and memory faded. He hid inside the church ruins. Old wood. Dust. Silence. But even here, the floorboards whispered. He searched blindly, tearing through rotted hymnals and broken pews, until he found it, a stone plate embedded beneath the altar, etched with the same spirals from Paul's drawings. A seal. Cracked, forgotten. At its center, a symbol long worn away, except now, it pulsed. Something stirred beneath. Rand knelt, hands trembling, unsure if he wanted to open it, or close it forever. And then, the journal. It lay at the foot of the altar, open to a page he didn't write. The seal was never broken. It was left unfinished. Below it, a name. Elias Crow. And another. Randall Davenport. His own. A choice was written in blood. To finish the seal, a soul must remain behind. One vessel. One guardian. He wept. Not from fear. From knowing. This was never about stopping something. It was about containing it. And now the weight fell on him. He placed his hand over the seal. It burned. It bled. It accepted him. And in the final moment, as the creature's footsteps thundered toward the church, Rand whispered one word. Close. And everything vanished. The sky cleared. The earth stilled. No blood. No wreckage. No sign. Just silence. And in the woods, if you listen closely, you can still hear the breath of something waiting. Behind the seal. Behind the silence. Still watching. Still whispering.